1513, an admiral drew a map on gazelle's skin of a coastline that shouldn't exist. Decades ago, a typewritten letter from the U.S. Air Force concluded that this coastline, it must have been mapped before the present Antarctic ice cap covered the land. And now, today, as that same mile-thick ice sheet melts, something is physically appearing on the frozen continent. To understand what is being unveiled, we have to go back to a dusty library in Constantinople, where this impossible story begins. The year is 1929. Inside the old Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, the air hangs still and dry. Sunlight drops in pale columns through the high arched windows, catching on drifting dust and on the uneven towers of ledgers and scrolls. This is not a glittering treasury, but a storage sea of paper built up in layers over centuries. In the middle of it sits a man named Halil Edhem, director of the new Turkish National Museum. His task is simple to describe and overwhelming to perform. Sort through the palace's written remains, decide what will be preserved and what will be discarded before the building opens to the public. He works methodically at a heavy wooden table, surrounded on all sides by stacks that press in like walls. The silence is broken only by the brittle crackle of old paper and the soft slide of folders. The smell of dust, dried ink, and tired leather fills the room. After hours, the air leaves a chalky taste at the back of his throat. Most of what passes through his hands is administrative debris, tax records, court decrees, forgotten letters, each one given a brief glance before joining a growing pile. Then his fingers brush against something that resists the usual crumble. It is cooler, smoother, with a slight give, like cured hide rather than paper. He pauses, pushes aside a stack marked for disposal, and draws out a tightly rolled cylinder of gazelle skin. Carefully, he eases it open across the cleared surface of his desk. Colors surface from the curl of parchment with surprising strength. Muted reds, sea greens, faded gold. Along the painted seas, tiny ships lean into hand-drawn waves, and portraits of distant rulers watch from the margins. In one corner, the writing is clear enough to read without effort. The name of an Ottoman admiral, Piri Reis, and a date, 1539. Halil is a man of archives and atlases, not easily impressed. Yet the more his eyes follow the ink, the more his professional calm thins. The coasts of West Africa and Europe sit where they should, shaped with a precision he associates with much later charts. Then his gaze reaches the outline of the Americas, rendered with a confidence that does not match the tentative, broken coastlines he knows from early 16th century maps. By the standards of the history he has learned, this level of detail should not exist here. His finger traces slowly along the familiar curve of Brazil, down past harbors whose names he could find in other documents. The shoreline flows south in a smooth, continuous line, instead of fraying into guesses and empty space. He pauses, checks the orientation, glances from one edge of the parchment to the other, as if expecting to see the telltale distortions or decorative exaggerations he knows so well. For a moment, the room, the dust, the waiting piles of paper fall away. There is only this coastline, holding a shape that feels both exact and impossible. The ink carries him beyond what he recognizes. The landmass does not stop where his own charts fall silent. It continues, bending into a vast southern extension that matches no atlas on his shelves. He frowns, leans closer, and in his mind calls up other maps he has handled. Renaissance globes with immense southern continents sketched in to balance the world. Speculative terra australis drawn more from theory than from sight. Map makers, he knows, are often cautious near known ports and bold in the empty margins. The thought settles in. This must be the same habit, a practiced hand extending the coast into imagined territory. A few moments pass before he lets out a small, resigned breath. A cartographer's fantasy, he decides. An accomplished example of a familiar pattern. Accurate observation, stitched to speculative invention. Valuable as a historical curiosity, perhaps, but unreliable as geography, where it matters most. With deliberate care, he guides the parchment back into a tight roll, the painted ships and unknown shores disappearing into a cylinder of pale skin. He sets it aside on a shelf with other unusual pieces, slated to be catalogued later. Interesting, but not urgent. In the new museum's hierarchy of needs, it becomes one more item in a long queue. There it stays. In the archives of Topkapi, the map passes nearly 3 decades in the dark, filed away and largely untouched. To Halil, it remains what he judged it that day, an impressive, flawed map from the age of sail. Only much later will another pair of eyes linger on that southern coastline and refuse to file it under error, seeing in its lines not a decorative mistake, but the beginning of a deeper question. Those eyes belonged to Charles Hapgood, and the time was 1956. Nearly 30 years after the Piri Reis Map was filed away, Hapgood stood before his history of science class at Keene State College in New Hampshire. On the blackboard, he traced the arc from ancient astronomers to modern physics, presenting the past as a progression, a river that never turned back. When a student raised a hand to ask about an Ottoman map said to contain impossible coastlines, Hapgood didn't deflect. He wrote the map's name in the corner of the board, underlined it, and said they'd come back to it. After class, most questions blurred together. That name on the board did not. He copied it into his notebook, alongside a list of problems to chase down, and within days, he had written to the Library of Congress. If this 1513 map really showed anomalies, he wanted to see them. The reply arrived as a high-quality photographic copy of the Piri Reis chart. Late one night, in the quiet of his study and the dry smell of old paper, he unrolled the copy under his desk lamp. The lamplight picked out the coastlines in a thin brown line. He checked the familiar shapes first: Africa, South America, against a modern atlas on the shelf behind him. Then his attention shifted to the cramped script pressed into the margins. He set a dictionary beside the map and line by line began to work through the Ottoman Turkish notes. It was slow, deliberate work. A phrase, a correction, a cross-check. In those dense sentences, a statement emerged. Piri Reis was explaining that this was not entirely his own creation, but a compilation, assembled from about 20 older source maps, some of them, he claimed, reaching back to the time of Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC. That discovery made the map feel less like a curiosity and more like an echo from an older world. But the real break in Hapgood's thinking came when he reached the notes written over the great southern landmass. There, the region was described as a country with a warm climate, and one line spoke clearly of large snakes living there. On a map table in 1956, that land south of the known continents could only be read as Antarctica, already by then known through expeditions and surveys as an ice-locked continent. Hapgood leaned back in his chair. Snakes. In Antarctica, he thought, hearing how absurd it would sound if a student had written it. It contradicted both common sense and the reference books on his shelves, which all agreed on the southern pole, frozen and uninhabited. It was easy to call this sailor's lore, a story pushed into the blank space at the bottom of the map. He was ready to file it away as exactly that, until his eyes returned to the southern shoreline. The line was not a smooth, decorative curve. It broke into bays and peninsulas drawn with a quiet confidence he did not expect from guesswork. Compared to the looser coasts on other early maps, this looked deliberate, almost measured. Whatever the notes claimed about climate, the geometry in front of him behaved like survey data. Over the next few days, the contradiction refused to let go. The notes described the impossible, yet the coast itself did not behave like fantasy. He pulled modern charts of Antarctica from the college library, laid them beside the Piri Reis copy, and traced the outlines. The match was not exact, but it was close enough that the resemblance nagged at him. He tried to dismiss it as decoration, or as a distorted borrowing from some later map, but the simple explanations would not hold. What began as a late-night check grew into a project that slowly took over his study. Maps climbing from desk to walls, and sections of the Piri Reis coastline, pinned beside columns of notes. In that quiet spread of paper, he stopped merely recounting the history of discovery and began testing it, knowing that in the mid-20th century academic world, arguing that a 1513 map preserved knowledge older than any known civilization could easily see him dismissed as a crank. He needed an ally beyond his campus, someone so respected that even an unlikely claim about an old map would be heard. He gathered his clearest comparisons and began drafting a letter to a scientist whose work on space and time had made him one of the most revered minds of the 20th century. And the man who received that desperate prayer, that letter launched into the heart of the scientific establishment, was Albert Einstein. To account for the impossible map, Hapgood had built a theory as radical as the anomaly itself. He called it Earth Crust Displacement. In his view, the planet's outer shell, the lithosphere, was not permanently locked in place. Under immense internal pressures, he argued, that shell could shift as a single unit, sliding over the molten mantle below like the loose skin of an orange. If that were true, the consequences would be brutal and sudden. A coastline that once looked out on temperate seas could, in a geological instant, be dragged into polar night. Forests and river mouths would be buried under accumulating ice, an ancient harbor frozen in place, while its outline remained preserved in memory, or on a map. In Hapgood's hands, this was the bridge between the Piri Reis chart and a very different Antarctica, one that had not always sat at the bottom of our world. To most geologists of the time, this was not bold, it was heresy. The discipline was moving toward models of slow, patient continental drift. A whole crust sliding in one piece sounded, to them, like science fiction. Colleagues brushed him off. Some called his work wild speculation. Others simply stopped replying to his letters. He could see the distance opening in departmental hallways and in the thin, polite rejections that came back from journals. Pursuing the anomaly was slowly isolating him. So, in the early 1950s, with his professional standing already under strain, Hapgood took a risk few academics would dare. He gathered his unsolicited manuscript, maps, calculations, and the outline of his displacement mechanism, and mailed it to the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. On the envelope, he wrote a single name, Albert Einstein. Einstein, by then in his 70s, and only a few years from his death in 1955, had already reshaped physics. He carried a reputation for caution towards sweeping, speculative claims about the natural world. His days were finite, his attention heavily demanded. Yet on his desk in Princeton, among the steady drift of requests and manuscripts, this thick package from an unknown history professor arrived, promising a link between ancient charts and the deep structure of the Earth. The easy path would have been to set it aside. Instead, Einstein opened it and read. The correspondence that followed shows what caught him, not a flashy conclusion, but the way Hapgood tried to build his case. In one of his early replies, Einstein didn't offer praise. He sent back pages marked with questions, handwritten notes edging the typescript, pressing on the math of how an entire crust could move without tearing itself apart. and on what internal forces could possibly drive such a shift. Hapgood, in turn, had to defend each step of his reasoning and adjust where Einstein's objections exposed weak joints. Soon, it was not just letters. At some point after those first exchanges, Hapgood traveled to Princeton for a private conference at Einstein's Institute. Accounts describe them working through the mechanism together. Hapgood's diagrams and calculations spread across a table, Einstein moving carefully from line to line, looking for breaks between assumption and consequence. He was not there to validate a pet theory about lost worlds. He was testing whether the proposed displacements could be made to coexist with known physics. When he found a flaw in the way Hapgood modeled the motion, Hapgood revised his work accordingly. This was the trial the theory had needed. Not acceptance, but sustained, critical attention from the sharpest mind of the century. Years later, when Hapgood's book, Earth's Shifting Crust, finally went to print in 1958, Einstein did something very few in his position would have risked. He agreed to place his name on the opening pages as the author of the official foreword. In that foreword, he tried to summarize his reaction to that first contact. He wrote, "The very first communication, however, that I received from Mr. Hapgood electrified me. His idea is original, of great simplicity, and, if it continues to prove itself, of great importance to everything that is related to the history of the Earth's surface." For Einstein, who usually spoke of untested ideas with restraint, electrified is a strong word. It suggests that, at least in that initial exchange, Hapgood's proposal jolted him out of the background hum of routine speculation. He was struck by the simplicity of the mechanism and by how much it might explain, if further evidence could be found. Einstein's foreword did not turn Hapgood into a mainstream authority overnight, and it did not settle the geological debate. Many specialists remained skeptical of Earth crust displacement, and still are. But the presence of Einstein's name and words at the front of Earth's shifting crust changed the terms of engagement. For any reader, it signaled that the theory could not be dismissed as mere crankwork without, at minimum, acknowledging that Einstein himself had found the reasoning worth serious examination. For Hapgood, that shift was profound. The Piri Reis Map was no longer just an oddity he waved in front of a closed door. His interpretation of it was now linked, in print, to the architect of modern physics. The records show that Einstein did not claim the theory was proven. He emphasized that its importance depended on whether it could continue to prove itself. Even in his endorsement, the condition was clear. The idea needed evidence. And that is where the story turns back from Princeton to the ice. Einstein's support was an intellectual key, a way of opening minds to the possibility that Antarctica's past might be stranger than its present. But keys are not doors. The real proof, if it existed at all, remained locked away under nearly 2 miles of Antarctic ice. The theory now had a powerful voice, speaking on its behalf, yet it still lacked a body. The search for that body, for tangible traces on the frozen continent itself, was about to begin. So the challenge was set. For Charles Hapgood, having a credible theory, even one that had caught Einstein's attention, wasn't an ending. It was a summons. If the Piri Reis Map really showed the land beneath Antarctica's ice, there had to be a modern counterpart that could prove it. He needed a chart of something no one in the 16th century was supposed to have seen at all: the subglacial bedrock. This was the 1950s. There was no internet, no instant database of polar research. Hapgood spent long evenings following footnotes through dusty journals, writing to research libraries, waiting weeks for thin packets of photocopies and translated abstracts to arrive. Most of what he needed lay buried in obscure technical reports from far-off survey teams. But eventually, among those scattered papers, he found it. a seismic survey of Queen Maud Land's topography, mapped in careful contour lines by the 1949 Norwegian-British-Swedish Antarctic expedition. Using modern seismic profiling, they had bounced sound waves through nearly a mile of ice to sketch the shape of the hidden continent below. Now he finally held both pieces, the ancient mystery and the best modern glimpse of the truth beneath the ice. Stop. Just for a moment. Picture the scene. In the quiet of his study, under the small circle of a desk lamp, 2 sheets lie on the blotter. On one side, a copy of the 500-year-old parchment, its surface faintly rippling as he smooths it flat, the paper giving a dry, soft crackle. On the other, the seismic charts of Queen Maud Land, the lines crisp and mechanical, smelling faintly of fresh ink and office paper. If these 2 shapes do not align, the theory collapses. Einstein's curiosity, Hapgood's years of obsessive work reduced to a footnote, if that. Everything comes down to a single, almost ordinary motion, placing one outline over the other. He began. With deliberate care, Hapgood laid a sheet of thin tracing paper over the seismic charts. Under his hand, it was smooth and slightly stiff, edges catching on the worn wood of the desk. You can almost hear the soft, steady scratch of the pencil as he follows the contour of the buried coastline, copying every bay, every inlet, every rise of the submerged mountain ranges. When he was done, he lifted the tracing paper. For a moment, he just held it up to the light, this translucent ghost of a hidden continent, the paper flexing with a faint rustle between his fingers. Then he drew a breath, steadying his hands, and slowly, deliberately, laid the tracing over the Piri Reis Map. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then his eyes began to trace the coastline where the 2 sheets met. Along that stretch of shore, the region modern surveys call Queen Maud Land, the outline he had copied from the seismic charts seemed to nestle into the older map's drawn coast. A bay here, an inlet there, a protruding headland, even a scatter of offshore islands. The patterns fell into place close enough that he had to lift the tracing and set it down again, just to be sure he wasn't seeing what he wanted to see. The fit, within the rough limits of both maps, was there. He realized he'd been holding his breath. The room was as it had been a moment before. The faint hum of the building, the circle of lamplight, the weight of 2 thin sheets of paper under his palms. Inside that stillness, the same thought circled, simple and impossible at once. It's real. It was all real. They knew. Someone knew. In that pool of light, a hypothesis he had chased for years no longer felt like a distant speculation. It looked, on the page in front of him, like a record of a coastline that should have been buried under ice long before 1513. To Hapgood, the implication was stark. It seemed that whoever first provided the data behind this ancient chart must have known Antarctica's edge as it was before the ice locked it away. But there is a limit to what one person can decide in the quiet of a study. No matter how clear the overlay looked to him, it was still just lines on paper, drawn and redrawn by a man already invested in the outcome. For a claim this disruptive, personal conviction meant almost nothing. It would have to survive the scrutiny of people whose entire profession was measuring coastlines and correcting errors. In the mid-20th century, some of the most exacting map analysts on Earth weren't in universities at all. They worked for the military. To test whether his impossible alignment could withstand that level of scrutiny, Hapgood submitted his findings to a special mapping division of the United States Air Force, leaving a single, unnerving question hanging over his work. What would the most powerful and skeptical institution on Earth make of 2 pieces of paper that seemed to show Antarctica as it was before the ice? Hapgood understood that a truth uncovered in private is merely a theory. For it to harden into history, it needed an authority that no one, not even the most stubborn academic could shrug off. So he began to assemble a package. Into a simple cardboard box went the copies of the Piri Reis Map, his own careful tracings on translucent paper, where a ghostly coastline emerged, and the comparison sheets showing the eerie match with the 1949 seismic survey data. Years of work reduced to a stack of paper. He addressed it to a unit whose entire existence revolved around precision. The 8th Reconnaissance Technical Squadron of the United States Air Force, a key mapping arm of the Strategic Air Command. He walked that box to the post, sealed and anonymous, and handed it over. In that moment, his research left his control, slipping into the vast machinery of the military, the way a message in a bottle disappears into a deep current. The 8th Squadron's cartographers mapped the planet not for curiosity, but for war. Now they were the ones who would decide whether his interpretation of a 16th century map was insight or delusion. And then there was only waiting. Each morning took on a small ritual. The walk down to the mailbox, the metallic scrape as he pulled the slot open, the brief catch of breath before he saw what was inside. Most days, it was nothing. Bills, circulars, ordinary envelopes that might as well have been blank for all they meant to him. He would set them aside and try to return to his lectures, his notes, his ordinary duties. But the thoughts stayed with him. Somewhere, if the system was working at all, his entire argument was now a file lying on a desk. In some office he would never see, men trained to chart coastlines from reconnaissance flights were paging through his tracings of a 500-year-old map. To them, it might have been a curiosity, a distraction between target maps and flight paths. For Hapgood, it was his professional life hanging by a thread. One dismissive comment, nonsense, scrawled in a margin, a box checked no further interest, and years of careful work would sink without a trace. Days stretched into a week, then 2, and the silence began to feel less like an absence of sound and more like a deep, unmoving layer of water above something fragile on the seafloor. He had chosen judgment from the one authority few would dare challenge. Now, he had to live with that choice, knowing he could not argue back from the other side of the mailroom. Then, on a summer day, the pattern broke. Among the ordinary envelopes was one that felt heavier, stiffer under his fingers. The return address stopped him where he stood. Department of the Air Force. For a moment he didn't open it. The house around him, whatever sounds were there, the ticking of a clock, a car passing outside, fell thin and distant. When he finally tore the edge of the envelope, his hands were steady enough, but only because there was no room left for anything except focus. Inside was a typed letter on official stationery, dated July 6, 1960. It was signed by the squadron's commander, Lieutenant Colonel Harold Z. Ohlmeyer. The opening lines were everything you would expect from a military mapping unit. Formal, economical, acknowledging receipt of the material and the unusual features of the Piri Reis Map. Ohlmeyer described his review in the careful, qualified language of a professional whose words would be filed and archived. And then, inside that measured tone, he offered a conclusion. Hapgood's interpretation, he wrote, was the most logical and, in all probability, the correct interpretation of the map. For Hapgood, that single sentence bent the room around him. The weeks of silence, the imagined wastebasket, the fear of being quietly dismissed, none of it had happened. A squadron whose job was to map the Earth with instruments, and flight data had read his work and, at least in principle, agreed. He could breathe again, not because a colleague had humored him, but because the Air Force had not laughed him out of the building. But it was the final paragraph that carried the real shock. Here, the careful, bureaucratic voice of the letter turned to the specific question of Antarctica. Ohlmeyer wrote, and this is taken directly from that closing section. The agreement of the Piri Reis Map with the seismic profile of this area places beyond a reasonable doubt the conclusion that the original source maps must have been made before the present Antarctic ice cap covered the Queen Maud Land coasts. This is not the language of speculation or casual curiosity. Beyond a reasonable doubt is the phrasing of a formal conclusion set down by a U.S. Air Force strategic mapping squadron comparing a Renaissance chart to 1949 seismic data. In their assessment, the coastline shown on Piri Reis's map matched the profile of Queen Maud Land so closely that the only logical explanation was that the original source charts had been drawn before that land disappeared beneath the Antarctic ice. For a moment, set everything else aside. A 500-year-old map, apparently aligning with mid-20th century seismic surveys, and an official letter stating that this agreement places the coastline source beyond a reasonable doubt before the modern ice cap. Before we uncover the final twist in this story, what does that do to your sense of the past? Does it shift the way you picture the history that lies beneath our feet and beneath the ice? For Charles Hapgood, that letter was everything he had hoped for, and more. In his mind, the argument he had been making from the margins had finally reached bedrock. If a technical squadron inside the Strategic Air Command accepted his interpretation as, in all probability, correct, then the establishment, as he understood it, had effectively conceded. The lost chapter he believed he had glimpsed was no longer just a private suspicion. It now seemed to carry the weight of official validation. Or so it seemed to him, because buried in the cool, official phrasing of Ohlmeyer's letter was something almost everyone skimmed past in the glow of that apparent confirmation. A small, precise detail that, once you notice it, suggests this perfectly satisfying answer may not be an answer at all. And for many, the story ended there. For decades, Charles Hapgood's vindication, seemingly sealed by the United States Air Force, was the accepted conclusion for those who followed the contours of this mystery. The case was closed. A lost civilization had been proven. But science, like the deep ocean currents, does not stand still. In the decades that followed Hapgood's first books, researchers quietly returned to his star witness, the supposed match between the Piri Reis coastline and the hidden shape of Antarctica. In published analyses that came after his work, academic cartographers and polar geophysicists went back to the raw geography. They compared the map not just to the outlines on contemporary globes, but to detailed reconstructions of the land buried beneath the Antarctic ice, and to models of how that land would have sat before the ice sheets pressed it down. Out of that re-examination, a crucial but previously underweighted factor came into focus: isostatic rebound. It's the subtle but powerful process by which a landmass, freed from the crushing weight of a mile-thick ice sheet, slowly rises and reshapes itself over millennia. Rock that was once bowed downward under the load begins to lift. Coastlines creep, tilt, and change their curves as the crust adjusts. The shoreline we see under the ice today is not a simple snapshot of what existed before the ice arrived. It is a distorted afterimage of that older world. Hapgood and the Air Force officers who echoed his comparison were effectively matching the Piri Reis Map to this warped, post-iced shoreline without fully correcting for how the continent had heaved and shifted. When later teams applied those corrections, mathematically lifting Antarctica back toward its pre-ice position and redrawing where an ancient coast would actually lie, the apparent harmony began to break apart. Bays and headlands that once seemed to lock neatly into place slid out of alignment. Curves that had looked identical no longer followed the same paths. The elegant, almost surgical overlap that Hapgood had treated as near-definitive proof of an advanced lost survey vanished. What the evidence now suggested was something far more mundane. a resemblance born of chance and our own desire to see a hidden design. In the map's own handwriting, another fracture line was waiting. Along that same sweeping southern coastline, the very stretch later writers would insist was Antarctica. The annotations describe a warm or even hot region, shores inhabited by large snakes. At first glance, it is tempting to imagine this as some echo of a greener Antarctica. And geologists do tell us the continent has passed through warm, even lush phases in the deep past. But those ages belonged to a time long before humans existed, let alone human cartographers capable of charting its coasts. Within the span of human history, and even the periods when our distant ancestors walked the earth, no version of Antarctica matches a snake-filled temperate shore. So the contradiction holds fast. The text on the map fits no Antarctic environment that any human being could have witnessed. The perfect match that once seemed beyond coincidence resolves into something more familiar. A classic case of the mind tracing patterns in the static, sketching a known shoreline onto an unknown land. This twist does not end the mystery. It sinks it into deeper water, where the outline of the puzzle itself begins to change. If the map is not a literal photograph of a world long lost, then what is it? Its uncanny nature shifts. Once the idea of an ancient eyewitness falls away, what remains is a chart that seems less like a memory and more like an anticipation, a drawing that feels almost prophetic, as if it is sketching a coastline the planet has not quite reached yet. It ceases to be merely a record of the past, and instead begins to feel like something else entirely. Something that looks not backward, but forward. And in this forward gaze, the Piri Reis Map reveals its most quietly unsettling prophecy. Its failure as a literal guide to the deep past doesn't end the story. It exposes a different kind of irony. The map did not, in the end, show us a world that was, but it seems to point toward a future it could never have known, a future that has quietly become our present. Today, modern science is doing, in its own way, what Charles Hapgood once imagined an ancient civilization had done. We are in the middle of an international effort to assemble the first near-complete, high-resolution map of Antarctica's hidden landscape, using years of satellite measurements. By January 2026, researchers expect a truly continent-wide picture of the bedrock beneath the ice, detailed enough to trace its major valleys, ridges, basins, and coastal thresholds. The tools behind this are not forgotten portal-on charts or mysterious source documents, but satellites circling in the cold darkness above the poles, tracking the height and subtle motion of the ice sheet, and returning streams of numbers instead of lines of ink. Our new language for the continent is data. The method at the heart of this work is known as ice flow perturbation analysis, a quietly ingenious way of turning those numbers into a map. Imagine the Antarctic ice sheet, miles thick, not as a static block, but as an impossibly slow-moving river. As this weight creeps over the continent, the terrain beneath, the buried mountains, valleys, and shelves, nudges and deflects its movement in subtle ways. From orbit, satellites register how the ice surface rises and falls, speeds up and slows down, tracing a faint imprint of the ghost landscape below. Because the physics of how ice flows over different shapes of ground are well understood and mathematically modeled, scientists can feed those surface patterns into their equations and work backwards, inferring the bedrock shape most likely to produce the disturbances they see. In one stretch of the continent, that backward reasoning drew out something remarkable. The ice there moved just a little faster and dipped a little lower along a single, sinuous line, a signature that kept reappearing in the data. When researchers ran their models, the best fit solution was a deep, narrow groove cut into the rock. Extended along the flow, it traced a hidden subglacial channel more than 400 kilometers long, a buried waterway carved into the continent itself. It was one discovery among many, but it showed what this approach could do. Reveal not just isolated peaks and pits, but continuous pathways where subglacial water and ice can move, routes that may one day guide how quickly parts of the ice sheet slide toward the sea. From parchment and ink, we have moved to pixels and algorithms, and that shift is now uncovering thousands of previously unknown hills, ridges, and vast winding canyons beneath the ice. Crucially, this new emerging map is not a single snapshot, but an evolving project. Each year of satellite passes adds another layer of detail. Each refinement of the models peels back another veil. By early 2026, the result should be a virtually continuous, high-resolution portrait of Antarctica's bedrock, dense enough that almost everywhere on the continent, we will know whether the ice rests on a shallow ridge, a deep basin, or a channel linking inland ice directly to the ocean. That level of detail is not just cartographic pride. The shape of that hidden ground controls how the ice above it will respond as the planet warms. Deep basins that dip below sea level can let warmer ocean water creep far under the ice. Steep buried slopes and channels can accelerate glaciers toward the coast. The new map feeds directly into models that try to forecast how quickly Antarctica's ice might thin and how much global sea level could rise as a result. There is a cost hidden inside the wonder. The same warming atmosphere and oceans that are already thinning parts of the Antarctic ice sheet are forcing us to understand its foundations in unprecedented detail, because that knowledge is becoming part of how coastal cities and low-lying societies plan for the seas that are beginning to rise. Seen from this angle, the modern Antarctic map is, line by line, our own creation. Yet it feels like the fulfillment of a promise the Piri Reis chart could only hint at. The strange suggestion embedded in that 15-13 parchment is being realized not by ancient magic, but by the slow, patient work of 21st century science. The data points to a hidden world, but as the ice itself continues its slow retreat, we are moving beyond abstractions on a screen. The story is no longer just about what our instruments can see, but about what our own eyes can. The unveiling is no longer just happening in lines of code or on a digital screen. The very ice that has guarded Antarctica's secrets for millennia is now the mechanism of their release. And it's a process we can all watch unfold. Across the Antarctic Peninsula, a landscape once defined by the monochrome silence of ice and stone is beginning to blush with life. Recent scientific reports confirm what observers on the ground have been whispering with growing unease. Antarctica is visibly greening. This isn't a subtle shift or a poetic exaggeration. In 2024, a study published in Nature Geoscience put hard numbers on what polar ecologists were already calling an explosive change. Using decades of Landsat satellite imagery, researchers tracked how patches of vegetation crept outward over time. In 1986, mosses and algae covered just 0.2 square kilometers of exposed ground on the Antarctic Peninsula. By 2021, that figure had grown to 11.947 square kilometers, nearly a 14-fold increase in a region that, for thousands of years, had been almost entirely locked in ice. The expansion was present before, but after 2016, the growth curve bent sharply upward. Thanks to archives from agencies like NASA and the NASA Earth Observatory, we can see this acceleration as more than a line on a graph. In time-lapse sequences stitched together from orbit, decades collapse into seconds. Gray, ice-scoured rock emerges from retreating snowfields. At first it's bare, almost metallic. Then, season by season, thin strokes of deep green appear in meltwater channels, clinging to cracks and depressions. Dark streaks of moss trace the base of once immobile ice cliffs. Shallow blue pools of meltwater form around them, reflecting a sky that looks unchanged while the ground beneath quietly transforms. It feels less like a landscape waking up and more like a new pattern quietly overrunning an old one. And over all of this, another kind of unveiling is happening at the same time. The same satellites that capture those fragile streaks of green also record something far louder. You can watch broad, white shelves of ice, the size of cities, fracture along hairline cracks. The fissures widen, darken, and then the front edge of the shelf begins to move. In sped-up footage, the whole face seems to shudder, then break apart. Vast slabs calve off in slow, catastrophic silence, slipping into the sea. If you've ever heard raw footage from the ground, you know it isn't silent at all. There's a deep, distant thunder as the ice tears, followed by a low, rolling roar as it hits the water. In those moments, the unveiling stops being a metaphor. The planet is literally shedding its armor. It's here, staring at these 21st century satellite images of retreating ice, spreading green and collapsing shelves, that the faint 500-year-old note on Piri Reis's chart stops feeling like an oddity in the margins and starts to sound strangely familiar. Remember, the map was never a perfect photograph. Its coastlines were distorted. Its scale was strange. Its southern boundary more suggestion than survey. Earlier in this story, it was easy to file away its most baffling feature, the note about a southern land that was once hot and rich with life, as a misunderstanding, a myth folded into the cartographer's sources, something safely separated from the real world by centuries of error. But once you've watched those time lapses, once you've seen bare Antarctic rock slowly reclaim color, that marginal note lands differently. The language of a warm southern land and the imagery of a greening Antarctic peninsula begin to rhyme. Not perfectly. Not in a way that turns the map into a photograph, but in a way that makes you sit with the uncomfortable possibility that whoever first described that coast to Piri Reis wasn't inventing everything from nothing. That ancient, improbable claim now reads less like fantasy and more like a distant echo of conditions that are, quite literally, reappearing. A climate that belonged to a different chapter of Earth's history is being replayed in fast forward. The past is being forced to the surface. The ice is melting, and it's revealing a snapshot of a world we were never meant to see at this speed. By the pace of natural cycles, these coastlines and climates would have stayed buried beneath ice for tens of millennia more. Instead, within a few human lifetimes, we find ourselves watching a lost version of Antarctica pull itself back into the light. And this is where the story turns from curious to unsettling. Because the forces driving this unveiling aren't mysterious. They are the result of greenhouse gases we've poured into the atmosphere, the accumulated effect of burning fossil fuels, remaking landscapes, and heating the air and ocean that wrap around the poles. The same warmth that lets moss and algae take hold on newly exposed rock is the warmth that loosens ice shelves and raises seas. We are not just deciphering an old map, we are recreating, through our own climate, some of the conditions that made that map possible. The ancient enigma and our climate future are no longer separate threads. They are the same story, folded across centuries. What was once a historical puzzle has become an ecological reality, unfolding in real time. And that reality is being driven by changes we have set in motion. The consequences of that convergence are only beginning to appear. New ecosystems are taking shape on ground that was lifeless in recorded history. Ocean currents and coastlines are shifting as ice gives way to open water. Species are moving, adapting, or vanishing in response to a landscape that is rearranging itself. Some of those changes we can model. Many we can't. The full chain of effects on sea level, weather patterns, and the buried records still locked in ancient ice is something no one can yet predict. So when we look back from these satellite mosaics to that 1513 chart, the unease doesn't come from the idea of prophecy. It comes from realization. A fragment of cartographic rumor from half a millennium ago now lines up, in its strangest detail, with what we can measure from orbit. History is no longer a distant, sealed-off layer beneath us. It is bleeding into the present as the ice recedes. The past is no longer buried. The white spaces on old maps, the blank interiors of ice sheets, the margins we once ignored, they are all turning into active, changing places again. Antarctica is not the only region where our warming world is revealing stories long thought to be lost, but it is one of the clearest mirrors. It forces us to read maps and ice and time itself differently, not as separate chapters, but as pages being turned too quickly. If you want to keep watching those pages turn with us, following the way forgotten coastlines, drowned valleys, and long quiet histories are being exposed by the very climate we've altered. Subscribe and stay with us as we watch what else begins to surface.